that our country is in dire straits. So I believe that this is a very important period to be in such an assemblage of elders of our country, to be able to review the ongoing problems and possibly profile solutions. This is a very good time to be part of a caucus of Nigerian leaders that will certainly evaluate the Nigerian situation and the state of the nation.
As another statesman, one who has been in the executive arm, came to the legislative arm, now back to the legislative arm, what is your take on the state of the nation?
Well, I believe that to clearly discuss and understand the state of the nation, there are 6 thematic areas we need to look at. One is poverty. I prefer to talk about poverty, ignorance, disease, 1. Then national transformation. 2, youth bulge, or the so-called youth restiveness. Critical infrastructure, gap crisis, and a failed expectation framework. So 6, poverty, national transformation, youth bulge, critical infrastructure, gap crisis, and failed expectation framework. Those areas clearly encapsulate the Nigerian situation. So we can discuss under those headings, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I want you to at least to break them down.
Okay, let me break them down. Okay. Let's start with youth restiveness. I'm sure you are well aware that if you look at demographic data, Nigerian population was about 38 million in 1958, thereabout. Presently, we are around 200 million. Demographic population dynamic studies show that by 2030, we expect to be 236 million. And by 2050, we expect to be 410 million. At that time, we will be the 3rd most populous country. Right now, we are the 7th most populous country. So what you have, because of improvement in social services, health, education, water, sanitation, and hygiene, there's an expansion. There's an expansion of working age population. That is between age 15 and 65. Expansion. And the under 25s. And the contraction. You have a contraction of the dependent population. That is below 15 and over 65. That is the so-called youth bulge. We have an expansion of youths and those between 15 and 65, and a decrease in the dependent age population. So what you have is this demographic expansion is going to have 2 outcomes. Demographic expansion, also called youth bulge. If it is managed appropriately, you're going to have demographic dividends. If it is managed inappropriately, you have a demographic bomb. So if you provide enabling environment to harness the economic effects, the positive effects of this demographic expansion, then it will be well for the country. You have a demographic dividends. What are the factors? If you have provide for education, provide for health, provide for skill acquisition, provide for employment, provide factors of labor and production, factors, land, roads. If you provide innovative technology, food, infrastructure, you can harness this population expansion and have demographic dividend. However, because of the problems we have in our country, this demographic expansion It's not being channeled positively. So we are nearing the state of a demographic bomb, which leads to vulnerability to indoctrination, youth restiveness, violence, agitation, communal strikes, right? Communal violence, ethnic violence, religious violence, domestic violence, and expectedly, as we move into election, electoral violence. So that has to do with the youth bulge. So as we discuss each case, if you want, we can profile solutions to it. You want me to go ahead?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So to deal with that, you're going to look at provide maternal care, provide even up to pre-conceptual counseling, provide health services to infants, right? You follow the child to nursery, nursery. Follow the child to pre-K, follow the child to kindergarten, right? Providing immunization and pediatric services. You now follow that child from elementary 1 to elementary 6, providing free, qualitative, compulsory primary education, tied with health services, tied with school feeding, right? And when we talk about school feeding, it is more than a meal, in the sense that coupled to that, you're going to have health services where you check for growth, you check for weight, check for dentition, look at the eyes for sight, visual acuity, look at hearing, and look at things like attention deficit disorder. So you see, you follow that child to primary 6. That child is now heading to age 12, right? For the mother, in terms of poverty alleviation, the mother can help provide the materials for food and other resources. Are you following me? Then at 12, you now follow that child into secondary school, right? That is JS1 to SS3, right? Provide free qualitative education. Continue with health surveillance, right? Okay. That child is going to enter university, going to enter technological school, or straight into labor in terms of skill acquisition. You see, you're following that child. The child that goes through university or goes through a technical college, right, enters youth service. That is where you now have an aggressive scheme for youth empowerment, right? So after university, that child is going to youth service. You're going to need to increase youth service to 2 to 3 years. 2 years compulsory with an optional 3rd year. Are you following me? At the end of that optional 3rd year, you're going to provide skill acquisition. You're going to provide entrepreneurial loan. You're going to provide agrarian loan to that young man before he now enters into society. Then you also have what I call a Youth Empowerment Commission, just as you have the Federal Character Commission, Youth Empowerment Commission. Because what is happening now is that by the time some of them are getting entry level positions, they're in their 30s. So some people may not even employ them. They are now looking at those in their 20s. So if you have a Youth Empowerment Commission, just like a Federal Character Commission, before you advertise for jobs, you're going to pass it through the Youth Empowerment Commission, and they will make provision for allocation, certain allocation for the youth. So that will deal specifically with the youths. Remember, when I talked about the state of the nation and talked about the 6 parameters, what is the goal? The goal is to eradicate poverty, reduce hunger, provide gender empowerment and gender equality, reduce the gender gap indices. Right? Are you following me? Reduce the gender gap indices. Provide free qualitative primary education, decrease infant mortality, improve maternal health, decrease the HIV, malaria, other communicable diseases, provide a sustainable environment, and provide global partnership. Are you following me? Yeah. Then of course housing and other areas. So this what I just described now, dealing with the demographic problems that will be associated with the youth board, also targets poverty alleviation and improvement in the quality of life index. Right? Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about poverty. Remember I talked about six areas. Yeah? Poverty, national transformation, critical infrastructure, gap crisis, failed expectation framework. Let's talk about poverty. You see, Africa, the so-called third world, has gone through a lot of travels over the years. Slave trade, colonialism, military adventurism, debt enslavement, right, debt enslavement, HIV, Ebola, all sorts of diseases, are now dealing with massive poverty. Okay. You know that poverty could be absolute or relative. So essentially you can define poverty as a failure to have an income that will meet your basic needs. Basic needs: food, water, safe drinking water, shelter, education, health, right? That is the absolute poverty. You may say $1.90, right? The relative poverty could be where your income is 50% less than the average household income for the index community. So you look at Nigeria today, poverty rate on the average is about 50%, right? Which means about 86.9 million people. So if you go all the way from the north, you can have high poverty rates of 81%. Down to Lagos areas that you can have 10 to 15%, right? In between the 70s, northeast 70s, coming down to central, north central 60s, southeast 40s, southwest 30s, down to Lagos 10, and of course southeast the 20s. So that is the poverty rate in terms of statistics. When we also talk about this poverty rate, of course in actual terms, you're talking about things like school enrollment, where you have about 14 to 16 million children on the streets, with about 12 million in northern Nigeria alone, right? You're talking about problems with infant mortality, maternal mortality, women dying from childbirth, kids dying from diarrhea, communicable diseases, malaria, HIV. Are you following me? So you have massive poverty, abandonment of hope, right? Okay. So what do you do for poverty? What did other countries do when they were faced with massive poverty, dilapidation of infrastructure, massive inflation, and economic depression? Go to America, right? The Great Depression, right? Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 1933-1936, where there was a concerted effort to attack poverty face on. So I believe that Nigeria has to have its own plan, targeted plan to address poverty. Just like as in 1933-36, Delano Roosevelt had the New Deal. I believe it was a New Deal, where they had aggressive public work projects. They had financial regulation, financial reform. They talked about relief, recovery, reform, right? Targeted to addressing poverty. They had a civilian corps. They had civil works administration. They had farm security administration. They had social security administration, all targeted to address poverty. Aggressive public works, bridges, roads, and of course financial regulations and financial reform. Then 1948, the Marshall Plan, Harry S. Truman, the 88th United States Congress, that provided European Recovery Act, where monies, about 12 billion or thereabout, was provided to Europe to help to recover from the Second World War. Then, of course, the New Deal program, Lyndon Baines Johnson, 64-65, where in order to attack poverty aggressively, money was devoted to provide, in terms of education, the Head Start and the Higher Education Act. In terms of health, Medicaid, they had transportation, they had housing projects, they had what they call the Greater Appalachia, where they addressed rural problems, and of course the housing project. So Nigeria has to evolve its own New Deal, has to evolve its own Marshall Plan, has to evolve its own great society. This is a targeted program, a holistic program to address poverty face on. Are you following me? Then we'll go to national transformation. National transformation. That national transformation would include total overhaul of the country that has to result out of an urgent need for a convocation of a conference of ethnic nationalities. Are you following me? That conference of ethnic nationalities will now decide, how do we apportion offices? How do we apportion roles? What method of governance do we have? That is what they call restructuring. Are you following me? Physical federalism. How do we share our resources? How do we share wealth? How do we apportion wealth? How do we tax ourselves? Right? That will be physical federalism. And how do we police ourselves? Is it state police? Is it federal police? Is it community police? Are you following me? So that conference of ethnic nationalities will now delineate modalities for a new Nigeria. Right? Remember that so far, from the evolution of the nation state, we've had several constitutions, starting from the creation of the Lagos colony in 1861, right? There was a colonial arrangement to administer the new colony. That took us to 1906, where we had the merger of the Lagos colony and the Southern Protectorate. Are you following me? So for you to have the merger of the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate and Lagos colony, there was now a 1914 constitution, right? Which was now used until 1922, when Governor Hugh Clifford now did the Clifford Constitution. Are you following me? So far, these constitutions, there was no involvement of the native element in terms of governmental administration. The government was run by the colonial governor. Then, of course, the 1946 Constitution by Richards Constitution, that gave some semblance of suffrage to some individuals, but it was based on £100 or £50. You have to have an income of £100 or £50 in order to participate. It was also in 1946 that the regions were formalized with the activity around that area. That was Governor Bodilon. They now had Eastern Region, Western Region, and Northern Region. Then, of course, you had the 1951 Constitution by Macpherson. And, of course, problems with the Enahoro, demand for independence by 1956, that led to agitation in the North, because they were not ready yet. And now led to the evolution of the 54 Constitution. That's the Little Constitution. And, of course, the Constitution that ushered in independence, the 1960 Constitution. Right? But even at independence, the Queen was still the head of state. So you now had the Republican Constitution in 1963. And of course, problems with the war, the civil unrest, and the return to civilian rule, 1979 Constitution, right? And the 1993 Constitution that would have midwifed the Third Republic. I believe that failed. And of course, the 1999 Constitution that we are dealing with. So what lacks in all these constitutions is they did not evolve from the people. Are you following me? Remember, there are two ways through which federations evolve. Either sovereignties come together, like in America. Remember, America started with 13 colonies, right? 13 colonies that fought for the War of Independence, that declared independence on 4th of July 1776, and then they fought on to 1783. Right? Okay. So you have sovereignties coming together and forming a federation, like America, like Canada, like Australia. Or you have devolution of governmental authority to sub-national groups, right, who now form the federating units, like Nigeria, Pakistan, India. Are you following me? But the difference is that the devolution that led to the federating units in Nigeria were not midwifed by the people. They were essentially midwifed by subsequent military regimes after 1966. Are you following me? So that what evolved was subject to the nuances, the personal biases of those who were running the military. Right? That is why you had East, West, North, essentially one unit. Of course, with the Midwestern region. Right? You now have the Southeastern region with 5 states? Yes. 5 states. And you now have a situation where the House of Rep seats in the entire Southeast could be compared to House of Rep seats in one state in the North. Are you following me? So you now find out that the federating units that evolved over the years are not equal. They are not just. And they cannot stand the test of time. That is why you have agitations. How do you quell agitations? You have to go back to the basics and derive a federating unit that is evolved based on participation of the multi-ethnic nations on the basis of equality. Do you understand? So you're going to have a convocation of a conference of nationalities of within the geographic area called Nigeria as soon as possible to address these agitations. These agitations that arise as a result of non-inclusiveness, as a result of imbalance, as a result of frustration. Right? So it has to be addressed. And if it's going to be addressed, it has to be addressed on the basis of equal representation by the different multi-ethnic units. Right? So Igbo 1, Yoruba 1, Hausa Fulani 1, Ibiram 1, Ijaw 1, Tiv 1, Ibom, Akwa Ibom, right? Ibibio 1. So just keep naming them. Urobo, Insecurity. Keep naming the multiple tribes of Nigeria that have to come to the table.
Distinguished sir, how will this conference you are calling for be different from the one of 2014 that had who is who in Nigeria?
No.
That with over 365.
No. I'm not talking about who is who. There's nothing like who is who. We're talking democracy now.
The young?
No, it's not the young, nothing. We're talking about it's not who is who. Let the government set up a secretariat. Let that secretariat call for representation. TIV, send us 4 people. If you want to send the youth, if you want to send whatever you want to send your business. Hausa Fulani, send us 4 people. Insecurity, send us 4 people. Urobo, send us 4 people. TIV, send us 4 people. Biram, send us 4 people. Are you following me? So all the ethnic groups in Taraba, in Plateau, multiple ethnic groups, Idoma, send us 4. All of us, even Adamawa. All the multiple ethnic groups, Ibibio, Yoruba, right? Edo, Bini, send us 4 people. I will come to the table. Who you send is your business. I will now put everything on the table. This fiscal structure, physical structure, how do we police ourselves, how do we govern ourselves, and we'll discuss. It needs to be done as soon as possible.
And if you come up with a robust restructuring,
they'll come up with a robust structure. It may not be restructuring. If they say we agree on where we are, we move. And then that package will now be sent to the National Assembly to be legislated on and converted into law with a concurrence by the 2/3 of the state houses of assembly. Is it clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Is it clear? So on the issue of state police, so what you can do is, meanwhile, since there is a preponderance of sentiment for state police, you had I just got the communique of the 17 southern governors calling for state police. Since there's a preponderance of sentiment in favor of state police, I have to adjust my personal preference and say, okay, put it to the conference of nationalities, let them decide, and to ensure that it is uniform among the federating units. So if you're going to have a state police, to maintain standard, let it be uniform amongst the various federating units. Because you don't have state police in one place with a certain standard. You end up in another state with a different standard of state police. Because as you know, states that have 10%, 15%, 20% poverty rate, will implement the state police program, but other states that have 81% poverty level. So you're going to ask yourself, if you don't pay salaries, what happens to the police? Do you understand? So it becomes uniform. Because even if you're comfortable in your state with your state police, your relatives live elsewhere, right? So Nigeria is an organic unit. So you're not going to be worried about just your own state. As an Igbo, I know that wherever you go in Nigeria today, my people are number 2 in terms of population. I hope I'm right. So as an Igbo, in as much as I'm comfortable with what is happening in Enugu, I'm also conscious of what is happening in the Igbo, in other areas. What will be the effect of state police on them? So it's an organic unit. So if you're going to have a state police, it needs to be standardized. It needs to be uniform. If it is not, any system that is non-uniform, non-standardized, is inherently unequal. Do you understand? Yes. Do you understand? So while we are waiting to deal with the problems and legislate on state police, I believe we have to emphasize community policing. Because after all, those who are talking about state police, they're talking about having police closer to the people, in terms of surveillance, in terms of intelligence gathering, in terms of knowing your community. So we can emphasize in Enugu, we worked with a DFID under Tafa Balogun to produce the first model of community policing. We worked with a DFID. So we can emphasize community policing while the modalities are being worked out. A constitutional framework out of a convocation of a conference of multi-ethnic nationalities for emergence of state police. You also have to be conscious of the historical evolution of state police. If you do a review, you see that state police, police in Nigeria started in 1861, McCaskey, with the Lagos Constabulary, right? Yeah. By 1888, we had the Northern Constabulary, which was actually Royal Niger Company that set up their own constabulary. So we had Lagos Constabulary and the Northern Constabulary by Royal Niger Company, 1888. By 1894, you had constabulary in Calabar, right? Right? That's the Niger Coast. Then we'll go to national transformation. National transformation. National transformation would include total overhaul of the country that has to result out of an urgent need for a convocation of a conference of ethnic nationalities. Are you following me? That conference of ethnic nationalities will now decide, how do we apportion offices? How do we apportion roles? What method of governance do we have? That is what they call restructuring. Are you following me? Physical federalism. How do we share our resources? How do we share wealth? How do we apportion wealth? How do we tax ourselves? Right? That will be physical federalism. And how do we police ourselves? Is it state police? Is it federal police? Is it community police? Are you following me? So that conference of ethnic nationalities will now delineate modalities for a new Nigeria. Right? Remember that so far, from the evolution of the nation state, we've had several constitutions. starting from the creation of the Lagos colony in 1861, right? There was a colonial arrangement to administer the new colony. That took us to 1906, where we had the merger of the Lagos colony and the Southern Protectorate. Are you following me? So for you to have the merger of the Northern Protectorate and the Southern Protectorate and Lagos colony, there was now a 1914 constitution, right? Which was now used until 1922, when Governor Hugh Clifford now did the Clifford Constitution. Are you following me? So far, these constitutions, there was no involvement of the native element in terms of governmental administration. The government was run by the colonial governor. Then, of course, the 1946 constitution by Richard's constitution that gave some semblance of suffrage to some individuals, but it was based on £100 or £50. You have to have an income of £100 or £50 in order to participate. It was also in 1946 that the regions were formalized with the activity around that area. That was Governor Bodilon. They now had Eastern region, Western region, and Northern region. Then, of course, you had the 1951 Constitution by Macpherson. And, of course, problems with the Enahoro, the railways and railways. You need to provide critical infrastructure. Talk about things like commerce, things like manufacturing, energy, electricity. Talk about health, talk about agriculture, and, of course, the security architecture. So let me deal with three. Let me talk about health. Do you understand? If you look at our constitution section 3, section 14, section 17, 17.3, that talks about social objectives, talks about government providing health facilities for workers and also health and medical facilities for the people as much as possible in terms of social objectives. Right? So that's a contract. That's a social contract. It talks about even in section 17, section 18.3, it also talks about education if possible, where possible. Talks about primary education, secondary education, tertiary education, and even adult literacy programs. So the right democracy in fulfillment of the social contract is that covers the entire people. So in terms of health, we have to have a holistic program that addresses the common man or the so-called indigent population, right? So you're talking about a national health service, what I'll describe as a national health service, or a unitary health service that covers everybody. Are you following me? Right? That will be patterned at the level of advanced community health centers, at the level of wards, electoral wards, general hospitals, at the level of local government, specialty or specialist hospitals at the level of senatorial zones. The pinnacle will be the Surgeon General. So it will be a unitary health program, a national health service covering all Nigerians, paid by the state. So it means that there will be direct withdrawals in terms of allocation. When you come to the distributive pool of federal allocation, right? There will be direct contribution from the federal government, from the state, and from the local governments that will be used in running this health service. Are you following me? So in terms of the security architecture, I believe we'll have time to discuss what is happening in terms of local terrorism, in terms of kidnapping, in terms of the killings and agitations here and there. That's a review of the security architecture. We can discuss that as the interview goes on. Review of the security architecture. We can also talk about agriculture, massive agrarian roles, cottage industries. Let me let you do your job.
Distinguished sir, we've been having cases of Or well, let's just say Nigeria is facing what we can call a serious security challenge.
Yes.
You go to the north, you go to the south, you
Yes.
go to find it. Sir, where did we actually get it wrong?
Okay.
What is your take on the security situation?
Okay.
And you also look at it from your own zone, especially the southeast,
Okay.
where we never had such place,
Okay.
and what is the way forward?
Before I go to my own zone, let me just look at where it all started. You have Boko Haram, operating from the Chad basin, right? Out of the Chad basin. You have the Islamic State for West African province, operating southwestern Niger, or Niger. You also have the Islamic State for the Maghreb, and also the Al Qaeda of. You have the Islamic State of Greater Sahara, Islamic State of Greater Sahara, and the Al Qaeda faction of Maghreb. I believe they have the Fulani headsmen, right? That's the violence, that's the bad, the negative Fulani headsmen. There are Fulani headsmen who are law-abiding. It's not all of them, right? Then you have the so-called banditry, which is local terrorism. All these are terrorism. To call it banditry is to sanitize it and color it. But it's local terrorism, operating essentially in the northwest. They have recently the activities in the southeast. And of course you have the headers, the local terrorism, the farmers' headers conflict, which is also local terrorism that has gone through North Central, is now in southwest and southeast and also part of south-south. It's local terrorism. Do you understand? Okay. Then of course the kidnapping and the problems that have been age-old problems with south-south, Niger Delta. Right? So let's take the one after the other. The Boko Haram has been ongoing for quite some time. Not much is being talked about it. What we are talking about now is the local terrorism, so-called banditry. And there are several factors. One is the border between Nigeria is specifically about 1,497 kilometers, about 1,500 kilometers. Right? It's not going to be easy to police such a wide border. So it's porous. The border is completely porous. You have influx of weapons from Burkina Faso, from Mali, and of course from Libya. So you have inflow of weapons from South Sahara and also the Sahel region. Right? So you have influx of weapons, porous borders. Then you have terrain, largely unpoliced, wide terrain with a thick forest, rugged terrain. So large spaces that are practically ungoverned spaces, right? You have gap crisis, massive inequality, right? You have poverty. You have overstretch of the security framework. The police, the army. The police operating in over 30 theaters, over 30 states. The army. Are you following me? You have areas of problems with immigration and customs. So these are contributory factors to the local terrorism, also called bandits. And then you have failed pact, failed agreements within these so-called bandits and governments. Agreements that failed, right? Agreements that failed because the bandits don't have common leadership, because the local communities were not involved, and because the monies given to them acted as incentives, incentivized them. So these problems are political. They are terrorists, right? And they are driven by levels of agitation, maybe religious agitation, maybe agitation in terms of inclusiveness. Then you come down to what's going on in the southeast that needs to be clearly delineated. It needs to be studied But one thing that is very clear is it is anti-Igbo. It is anti-cultural. As Igbo, we don't sneak at night into police stations and burn them or burn our infrastructure. So I condemn it and condemn it in its entirety. But it needs to be studied. But it boils down to one issue: inclusiveness, dialogue. Right. So in a system where some people believe they are oppressed, there has to be dialogical means to address it. If you remember the pedagogy of the oppressed, there has to be dialogue. Are you following me? There has to be some form of dialogue, which is discussion, conference, cultural assimilation, understanding, faith in the system. Are you following me? So this needs to be addressed.
So to address the one, especially in the Southeast, what should be the level of discourse, dialogue, that especially the state governors should be engaged in, that they are not doing?
No. I already told you. Even the Southern governors meeting today, when they came out with their communique, they talked about convocation of a conference of nationalities. We need to talk. We need to sit down and talk. And of course, there are two other areas that I have not discussed. One is the gap crisis. Another one is the failed exploitation framework. Gap crisis is where you have massive inequality. You have economic inequality, you have gender inequality, and you have regional inequality. Regional inequality is a disparity in data in terms of poverty between the extreme north and the extreme south, right? Where you have poverty running from 81% down to about 10 to 15%. Then gender inequality is the gender gap indices, where Nigeria is 128 out of 153 countries in terms of gender gap indices. And gender gap indices looked at quality of life, things like health and survivability, educational attainment, and economic empowerment. So you see there's a gender gap. You see that traditionally the African system is being built traditionally to go against the woman, right? What do? Mostly unskilled, casual labor. There are practices where they can't even own land. Are you following me? So you have areas where 75% of poor women are illiterate. You even have states in this country where there is 94% illiteracy rate in women, while 28% of the richest men are illiterate, are not educated. 28%. But 75% of the poorest women are not educated. So you find out that the factors of production, factors of labor, are skewed against the woman. So we're going to have gender empowerment and gender equality. In terms of economic inequality, we already talked about the poverty index, and we talked about absolute poverty. I remember I told you the situation with Nigerians' absolute poverty is that absolute poverty has nothing to do with economic growth. So even if the economy is doing well, the people who are absolutely poor still stay in that condition. It doesn't affect them. Right? If you look at Nigeria, in terms of GDP, Nigerian growth rate was about 7%, economic growth rate, from the year 2000 up to 7%. Yet, if you look at data, the poverty rate increased from about 69 million people poor in 2004. By 2010, you had about 102 people in the category of poverty, 102 million people. So you can see that while the country was growing, it did not affect the rate of poverty, absolute poverty. Within the same period, you also had over 44% increase in millionaires. Why? Because there's a synergy, there's a partnership between those who are politically powerful, right, and also who are economically powerful. There is a synergy in the sense that they skew. You see, powerful policymakers and powerful rich people form a synergy. They form a partnership. So they skew policy in their favor, right? Policy that will lead to opportunities, policies that will lead to economic wealth, they skew in their favor. So you have things like import waivers, you have things like tax relief. Are you following me? Even in terms of policy, agriculture employs about 50% of the people, most of the poor people. So they're not going to talk about agriculture, they're going to talk about the oil sector, right? Where massive money is voted for refinery repairs and all that stuff. So you have the policy is skewed in favor of the rich in alliance with the politically powerful. Are you following me? That is the problem with economic inequality. They have allocation of resources. Where in Nigeria, if you look at budgetary allocation, where education is about 6.5%, health is about 3.5%, social services is about 6% or that range, compared to a country like Ghana, where education is about 18%, health about 13%. Are you following me? Are you following me? So Nigeria's economic inequality, Nigeria's economic inequality is fostered by interest of the politically powerful and the politically rich, right? With elite capture of the state. Then, of course, we talked about a failed expectation framework, yes, right? Which is also part of the frustration, part of the agitation. Our Constitution, 14(2)(b), right, says that the role of government, the primary role of government, is the welfare and security of the people. Okay. Remember, in terms of social contract, those who vote for you expect something in return for their vote, so-called dividends of democracy, right? So when people invest in democracy, when people invest in the process, they expect a return. So there's a failure of that social contract. So that's failed expectation framework. So if you remember the Arab uprising, if you remember that the world is digital, if you remember the effect of social media, it's a global world. So just as we have agitations all over the world, within the country, youth restiveness, problems with lack of inclusion, problems with poverty, there is greater sensitization. Due to a failed expectation framework, we have all these agitations.
So do you subscribe to amnesty for armed bandits as a way forward?
Amnesty for what?
Armed bandits, which some people are advocating in some quarters. In fact, it even came up in the floor of the Senate.
Amnesty for armed bandits.
And Boko Haram.
What
they have come out and say, okay.
What I subscribe to is a plan that will attack poverty holistically, attack poverty aggressively. What I subscribe to is a plan where it will be unattractive for the youth to become a bandit. Are you following me? Remember, we talked about failed expectation framework. We talked about social contract. There's an allegiance between the people and those who govern them. There's loyalty. There's loyalty to the state. So if loyalty to the state is effective, there won't be a loyalty to the bandit leader. Do you understand? So there's competition. There's competition between the government and the terrorist leaders for the bandit. Right? The youth that is between 12 and 18. Does he become a bandit and become loyal to a bandit leader? Or does he remain a responsible citizen and become loyal to the government? So government has to compete in order to maintain that loyalty. How do you maintain that loyalty? Adult literary education for those who fell through the cracks. Some level of welfare. You can give them money. Some level of welfare. Right? You can give them money for coming to the adult literacy class. You can give them money for being good citizens, right? You attack unemployment. Unemployment rate is anywhere between 12 and 20%, 21%, and underemployment is even worse. Attack unemployment. Provide critical infrastructure, right? Provide innovative technology. Provide agrarian loans. Provide cottage industry. Provide some level of entrepreneurship. Then you don't have bandits in the first place, and there won't be any need for amnesty. Do you understand? Do you understand? There's a fight for the soul of the youth. Does the youth become a bandit? Does the youth become a bad citizen? Or does the youth remain a good citizen and stay loyal to the government? Government has to fulfill its contract. Government has to attract that youth. Right? Right? Select areas where bandits operate. Have a registry of the youth. Provide welfare for them. Provide adult literary classes for those who fell through the cracks. Provide jobs. Right? Provide small cottage industry. Provide agrarian loans. Use the power of government and the wealth of government to keep them, rather than allow them to get to the bandit. That's what I'm interested in. Convocate, provide a conference where the multi-ethnic nationalities will get together and trash out the problems. The earlier you do, the better. That will save you the effort of talking about amnesty or talking about ransom.
Distinguished Doctor, ahead of 2033, there are calls for Southeast. Does the region have the wherewithal to produce a president come 2023?
All regions in Nigeria have the wherewithal to produce presidents, including the Southeast. But you must also remember that the presidency, I believe, is overrated. It's not about presidency. As an Igbo, I know in my heart, as an Igbo, I know in my heart that the fight for effective representation, the fight to derive the benefits, the rajiz of the Nigerian state does not rest with the presidency. Right? As an Igbo, one of the nationalities that make up the multi-ethnic state Nigeria, our future, our survival does not rest on an 8-year presidency. It rests somewhere else, but I won't tell you. So I'm not going to tell you, but it's not with the presidency. Right? What will stamp Igbo solidly on the firmament of the history of this nation is not an 8-year presidency. It's somewhere else. I won't tell you, you can go find out. It has nothing to do with the presidency. Presidency is overrated. In a society where there's elitist dysfunction, the presidency is personal to who holds the job. After all, people have held the presidency, regions have held the presidency for over 40 years. What is the poverty rate? What is the school enrollment rate? What is the infant mortality? What is the maternal mortality? Right? What is the gender gap indices? Right? Even ordinary thing like open defecation. What is the rate? So it has nothing to do with the presidency. It's personal. Depends on who holds the job. Do you understand? Depends on who holds the job. If the presidency were to, if development, you have economic growth and you have economic development. Economic growth has to do with GDP and all that stuff. Economic development are the consequences of effective utilization of economic growth that will transmit to reduce poverty, reduce unemployment, and increase in the quality of life index. Are you following me? However, having said that, I'll summarize by saying that in the context of the politics of Nigeria, the Igbo Southeast deserve the presidency and should be given an opportunity.
And finally, from this, the National Assembly is in another round of constitutional review. Outside of what you have said, sir, what should be the top burner as you begin another round of constitutional review?
No. What should be in the top burner in Nigeria is a convocation of a conference of multi-ethnic nationalities that make up Nigeria on basis of equality. Right? Right? The resolutions derived therefrom will now be tabled to National Assembly to legislate and put into law as a constitution with concurrence of the states, of 2/3 of the states of the country.
As an elder statesman, your message to Nigerians?
Well, I don't know whether I'm an elder statesman as it is. My nation, my message to Nigeria, that these are tough times. These are make or break times for the nation state. We have to forget we have to bury our differences and put Nigeria first. The only way we can do that is to provide an enabling environment where every child from every ethnic group, where the child of a Hausa Fulani, the child of an Igbo, the child of a thief, the child of a Rijo, the child of an Ibibio, the child of a Sekiri, Urobo, Bini, Yoruba, where they will have the equal opportunity to fulfill their greatest potential. And we need to talk, and we need to talk urgently. Things are certainly falling apart, and the center is certainly not holding. Thank you.
Thanks.
Wow.